Dr. Suresh Rao, Dr. Bipin, Dr. Professor Havit, would you like to moderate this session? And Dr. Shine. And to begin with, we'll start with a case discussion, a very interesting case, and it's going to be presented by Dr. Rajesh Sharma.
Good morning, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank Snehal and Prashant for having us here. For surgeons especially, this is a very illuminating and stimulating session. We have, at least I have never attended a pulmonary hypertension meeting, and I used to think it's only about drugs and all, which all these drugs actually go over our head because we know only about sildenafil and bosentan. The other drugs are all foreign to me, but gradually I think they'll sink in as they start coming into common practice. But very, very nice to be here, and I'm really learning a lot. So I was reading the program, and I just came across an invitation to Prashant that you'd be happy to have a few presentations. So I thought we had done an interesting case, and it may be of interest to all the people here. So we all know that large post-tricuspid shunts are symptomatic in early infancy because of increased pulmonary blood flow, and if they are left untreated, they are prone to succumb to CHF and infections, and if they escape that, they are likely to become Eisenmengers. So we came across a girl, 11-year-old girl, who was referred from abroad, and she had a large VSD. The parents always knew that she had CHD, but since she was asymptomatic, they did not seek medical treatment, and they were hoping that the hole would close spontaneously. However, she started getting symptomatic for the last few months. On examination, there was no murmur. There was a loud second sound. She was cyanosed. The saturation was 85%. The ECG showed was suspicious of WPW, and there was right axis deviation and right ventricular hypertrophy. This is her X-ray, and as you can see, there are it's right atrial enlargement, and there is no left ventricular configuration at all. The lung fields had increased markings and looked definitely plethoric, but the heart size was not indicating a big shunt. Echo showed mesocardia. The heart was a little right-sided. A normal segmental analysis. There was a small fossa ovalis ASD. There was a large non-restrictive VSD with inlet extension, and it had right to left shunt. It was pure right to left. There was bilateral SVCs. The LSVC was draining through the coronary sinus into the right atrium, and there was absent innominate vein. The pulmonary veins drained through a common ostium on both sides, and there was severe stenosis of both the ostia with a mean gradient by echo of 8. So this picture shows us the location of the VSD, which was in the inlet extending into the outlet. And this shows us both the right and the upper and the left pulmonary veins, the single opening on either side with the turbulence at the entry. The Doppler signal showed a mean gradient of 8. We got a CT scan done, and it showed a dilatation of the pulmonary veins towards the lungs and stenosis at the point of entry into the left atrium, both on the left and the right side. She was then subjected to cardiac catheterization, and the basal data on room air showed the pulmonary artery pressure and the aortic pressures were identical. There was hardly any step up from the SVC to the pulmonary artery. And the QPQS was 1:1 and with the raised PVRI. We don't have nitric oxide. We still do our catheterizations with oxygen. On this, the results showed that there was increase in the pulmonary artery saturation, but no change in the pulmonary artery pressures. The calculated PVRI came to 4, approximately 4. And this is probably because of some reactive element, because the pulmonary venous stenosis, I suppose, would not change with any oxygen inhalation. Since the pulmonary artery wedge pressure the pulmonary vein pressure, the pulmonary artery wedge pressure was 24 and the LA pressure was 6. So because of this gradient across a limited localized area, which was localized to the entry of the pulmonary veins, and since the veins towards the lung were dilated, we thought this was treatable, and therefore we decided to go ahead with this operation. Initially we thought that we would correct the pulmonary vein stenosis on both sides and probably fenestrate the VSD because of our advanced age and possibility that the pulmonary artery pressure may not regress, at least immediately. But when we went inside, we found that the VSD was actually anatomically not that big, and it was about a 6 to 7 millimeters VSD, which if you take the patient size was really not that big, and fenestrating this kind of VSD was actually like not closing the VSD at all. So we actually closed the VSD, we corrected the pulmonary vein stenosis on both sides using a sutureless technique. And she did well after surgery. She came off bypass with a PA pressure of 40 systolic compared to 100 systemic systolic pressure. She was doing well, so weaning of ventilator was accompanied on the first 24 hours, after first 24 hours, but she had an episode of pulmonary hemorrhage, so she was again put down and put on the ventilator. We kept her on ventilator for another 48 hours, and following that, the weaning was asymptomatic, and we were able to remove her off from the ventilator without any problem. Pre-discharge echo showed good ventricular function without pulmonary vein obstruction, and the pulmonary artery pressures had come to normal. So this shows the post-op echo of both the pulmonary veins, and you can see that there is no turbulence, and there is good phasic flow. The PA pressure by TR was 32, and we could discharge her on the 14th postoperative day. So this was done only recently, and a long-term follow-up is still awaited, but it shows a particular phenomena that is sometimes found in our practice, and that is in cases of obstructed TAPVC which coexist with VSD, or large VSDs with mitral stenosis or supramitral ring. So in spite of the fact that they may present with a right to left shunt at the VSD level, they may actually be operable. Now I say may because I'm not sure whether all of them would be operable. And here two wrongs actually make a right. So the high pulmonary flow from the VSD is prevented because of the inflow obstruction which was there at the pulmonary venous stenosis level, and the back pressure from the pulmonary venous stenosis, it is prevented from affecting the pulmonary arteries because the VSD decompresses that back pressure. So these two bad things probably, treat each other, and the patient still remains operable despite them. However, long-term follow-up will tell if this theory actually holds, and that also depends on if she does not develop recurrent pulmonary vein stenosis, which is a likelihood, and she needs to be on continuous follow-up. Thank you. It was just a case presentation. If any in the audience have such an experience, I've come across case reports like this, but I don't know if there's a series of these patients. Dr. Kothari.
It was PDA with differential cyanosis, Eisenmenger PDA with a mitral stenosis. And that child came off the bypass like a song and is doing very well after 5-6 years. And recently, the next cardiology in the young, it will come another VSD with mitral stenosis. So I think your point is very valid. I think we should probably document such cases that anytime there is a back pressure, there is a pulmonary venous obstruction. We discussed that sometimes before, but there's not a whole lot of data, but I have seen at least 3 cases documented, and I think this is a very nice presentation, and we must keep this in mind, that anytime we turn them down, but it will depend on the severity of MS. You got to have
Right.
severe MS, severe obstruction. If you have mild to moderate MS, then it may not work. So should you have a severe PVH, then somehow it protects the PAH. How
Right.
does it do so? I'm not very secure, but we have documented that it does so.
Also, in this case, the important thing for going ahead with surgery was that the pulmonary veins were dilated towards the lung. If they were small throughout, if they were, stenotic in a long extent, then probably we would not go in for this and leave her untreated. Thank you.
Rajesh, just one comment. Many times you see in these infants, when you have a large VSD and you have 1 or 2 pulmonary veins which are small, may not be both, maybe just a right upper or left upper pulmonary vein or one. So what do you think happens in those?
So my own practice is that I would look at the ostia from inside, and if there is no fibrosis, I would not do anything. But if there is a fibrotic ring, I would, do something about it, and especially if the vein which is towards the lung, that segment is dilated, and we are able to achieve something effective. Which also brings me to the point where Dr. Kothari said, one-sided pulmonary artery banding and the other side unbanded, if you join them together, they would do well. If you have one pulmonary vein stenosis only out of all 4 openings, it is supposed to reflect on both lungs. So it is supposed to cause uniform pulmonary hypertension, and we've seen it. But I don't know if it's exactly comparable, but you said one pulmonary artery, if it's hypertensive, you connect it to the other, it will get an average in between. So, I'm not 100% sure that phenomena actually would be correct if we use it, but. Yes, it does.
Because this is important, because you, as a surgeon, you are hesitant to touch these pulmonary veins because we can do more harm than perhaps good for these. And the other thing is, there's always the feeling that the moment you close the VSD, maybe the gradients and all would come down across the pulmonary veins.
Thank you.